Greetings viewer. This week I'm driving the fully electric Fiat 500e. A car that, while it certainly looks like its predecessor, it's actually a completely different car and it's new from the ground up. It really amuses me that every time I look at this car, all I can think about is its predecessor, which has been one of Fiat's most popular products. Hence why it has been kept in production for over a decade now. But when I look at that car, the original new 500, launched in 2008, it honestly brings the 1950s classic to mind, whereas this car somehow doesn't. Maybe it's because the 2008 car is much fresher in my memory. And when I saw that for the first time, the 50s classic was the only car that came to mind. But now that there are thousands and thousands of the new 500s, that shape really has become iconic on its own. And the same can be said of the interior. This new 500e interior is nowhere near as retro looking as the previous cars. Sure, you still get some body colored plastic here on top of the dash, which is similar to what the original had, but its context is far more modern, and it's also a bit more upscale than the car it will replace in 2 years' time. Oh, I have to mention that Fiat will keep the gas-burning 500 in its lineup for another couple of years probably, and it's been able to do that by turning it into a mild hybrid. That car surprised me by just how not maneuverable it was. I was expecting such a small car with such a small wheelbase to be very, very easy to maneuver. However, something was wrong about it, because even if you applied full lock on the steering, it didn't seem to be that pointy, and you often had to do 2 or 3 point turns when you weren't expecting you were going to have to. In fact, in the parking spot in front of my building, my BMW 3 Series sedan has no problem getting out of the parking spot in one single maneuver, whereas with the 500 I have to make 2 maneuvers in order to get the car out of the same spot. It's ridiculous. And that's the first thing that I appreciate about this new car. It is far, far more maneuverable. It is not quite as maneuverable as the Honda E, which has London cab levels of steering lock, and its turning circle is amazing. But now it is genuinely as maneuverable as you would expect and want it to be, finally. Another disappointment with the older car is just how stiff and uncomfortable the suspension is. Like, it is rock hard, and it still has quite a bit of lean through corners. I'm not sure how Fiat managed to get it so wrong, to make the car uncomfortable and somehow still make the suspension soft enough for it to roll through corners. Which is why I'm super happy that this new electric one rides, well, it's like a luxury car compared to that one. The damping is far more sophisticated, and it just makes the car feel like it's floating, in a good way. But for the kind of bad roads that we have in Bucharest, I would take this new car over that one any day. Another thing I did not like about the previous 500 was its lack of usable storage spaces inside the car. Whenever you placed something, say like in a cup holder, those were so shallow that whatever you put in there would jump out at the first pothole, and it would roll around the vehicle and you would lose it under the seat or something. That happened so many times. And while this new car is certainly not the most practical thing out there, it has big door pockets, it has a usable cup holder here. The armrest cubby is really, really big. Well, it's not wide, but it's very deep. You could probably put like a bottle in there. Oh, there's a smaller cup holder inside for like some sort of energy drink. You also get a nice armrest, which slides forward, making the experience on board this Fiat a much comfier one than before. And thankfully, this new electric car has a reach adjustment for the steering as well. And thanks to the reach adjustment, I can adjust my driving position so much better and be so much more comfortable behind the wheel. Just like in the previous car though, the seating position is quite high. It's SUV-like. You have a very good view of the road. The trade-off is obviously it doesn't feel quite as sporty as its main rival, the Mini Cooper SE, the electric Mini, where your ass is slammed on the ground in true BMW fashion. And for me, that transforms the driving experience because you feel what the car is doing so much better when you're that low. Here, you kind of feel like you're sitting on the car, but at least you don't have to stretch out to reach the wheel because with this new reach adjustment, it's close to hand. And just like that car, you have a lot of headroom. I'm not sure what you would use this headroom for, unless you have a penchant for tall hats or one of those fruit hats like they had in the cartoons. Some sort of tropical fruit hat with pineapples and whatever. And even though this car has grown by about 10% compared to its predecessor, I don't think there's really any more room for passengers in the rear. I would have no chance fitting behind myself in this car in any comfortable way. The trunk capacity is exactly the same, 185 liters, which is a bit more than the Honda E, but a bit less than the Mini Cooper SE. Now, when I talked about the fact that this car reminds me of its predecessor and not the 1950s original, I didn't say whether or not I like it more than its predecessor, and I honestly do. I think it looks wider, more planted, sportier, which in my book is always a good thing. I also like the new headlight arrangement that retains the basic shape that you saw on the previous car, but now the front clusters are split. So you have like LED brows that you actually lift with the bonnet. And it's worth mentioning that the front end of this vehicle no longer says Fiat, it just says 500. Because 500 has become a brand in its own right. The steering wheel says 500, the C-pillar says 500. There's a piece of trim hidden by this infotainment screen here in the interior that also says 500. It's not a Fiat, it's a 500. Oh, and the seats also say 500. And if I keep looking around, I'm sure I'll find more instances of 500. I also like the side repeaters, which are wings, and they look really cool. The exterior still looks like that of the Fiat 500 that we've grown accustomed to, but the interior really bears no resemblance to that of its predecessor. You get a digital screen in front of the driver, which has a nice resolution, nice graphics. It doesn't seem laggy or outdated like in some cars, even more expensive cars. It looks very modern. The extra wide infotainment screen is also very good. It's running the latest version of Uconnect. The car now has toggle switches for the climate controls, and the buttons for the transmission are placed below. In between them, there's like a recess in the dash where Fiat has niftily hidden a panorama of the city of Turin, where this car is now built. It's no longer built in Poland. And said recess also has a wireless charging pad for your phone if you have selected that option. The transmission buttons are actually within easy reach and they work. They are nice to use. The steering wheel has a flat bottom. It's covered in leather. It says 500 as I previously said. It has all sorts of buttons. On the left you can navigate through the gauge cluster screens, answer the phone, while on the right you adjust cruise control, which is a now adaptive cruise control that maintains a distance to the car in front. After charging the vehicle for a little bit, because I was running low on juice, I think it's a good time to talk about the EV side of things. This new 500e is available with two battery packs, a 24 kilowatt hour pack and a 42 kilowatt hour pack. My tester has the latter, the bigger one, whose usable capacity is 37.3 kilowatt hours. This gives the car a claimed range on the WLTP cycle of 305 kilometers. Although in the real world, you should expect it to do some 250-ish kilometers on a single charge. This car's onboard charger is pretty good. It can charge the car at up to 11 kilowatts. But its fast charging capability is also pretty impressive. It's 85 kilowatts, which should top up the battery from 10 to 80% in around half an hour. There are also two motor options. There's the 95 horsepower motor, which is the base one, and then there's this one, which is a 120 horsepower motor. The car is front-wheel drive, and the motor is placed under the hood where you would expect to find it. However, even though it's placed quite low there, you don't really have a frunk. I mean, you don't have a frunk at all. The 500e is one of those EVs that you can one-pedal drive. It has 3 driving modes, none of which is called Sport. So you have normal, range, and Sherpa. And in either of the 2 latter modes, the car has very strong regenerative braking. I didn't touch the brake there. So you can make your brake pads last a long time, although there's only 2 of them because this car has drums on the back. I think that even though thrashing the living daylight out of a small displacement Fiat engine was very amusing, and it was in keeping with the small Fiat's character, I think this car loses nothing in becoming an EV. I just hope that they make an Abarth version of it, because that should be really, really fun. Maybe something to challenge the Mini Cooper S for power, so maybe in the 180-ish horsepower range would be nice. Lower and a bit stiffer suspension, a nice body kit. But this car is very competent at taking you around the city. It's comfortable, it's spacious for 2 people. It's full of tech. It's got Android Auto and Apple CarPlay that are wireless. It's a comfortable place to be. It's very stylish. It probably looks better than most other small electric city cars, although I do still think I prefer the Honda E. Granted, it's not good enough for you to just go out and buy it before trying out any of its rivals. That would not be recommended, I think, because you might find out you like those more. But it's definitely a vehicle that should make your shortlist for small electric city runabouts. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching and take care.